Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope that you can see me and hear me. Welcome from the early hours of the morning in London. I love your animated videos, by the way, while we were having coffee. Please let me extend a warm hello from London to Bangkok, and to say what a pleasure and honor it is to be part of this opening plenary. My name is Richard Horton. My home is the Lancet, and it is indeed a great pleasure to be with you today. You know the program. We're going to have an opening by Andrew Magnusson, followed by a discussion with three distinguished participants, Vivian Camacho, Omnia El Omrani, and Bantun Lamsam, who we've already had the pleasure of hearing from. Let me just make a few introductory remarks about Andrew Snare Magnusson. If you haven't read his book on time and water here, please can I encourage you to do so. It's a compelling provocation. He writes that we should have a reverence of nature for what it is, a sacred place, not for its pure economic or instrumental value. He shows how the time of greatest change is upon us now, and that we consistently overestimate our freedom in the world. He points out that the biggest developments of the past 30 years have indeed been setbacks, not advances. And he asks the question, now that the earth is in trouble, should we be calling for an economist or for an ecologist? So let me now clear the stage for our plenary speaker, Andrew Snare Magnusson. Please give him a very warm welcome today.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be part of this distinguished conference. I'm going to talk to you about time and water. But in the next 100 years, all elements of water on our planet is going out of balance. That is, glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, permafrost is thawing, patterns of rain and snow are changing. The pH level of the world oceans are reaching a level not seen for 50 million years. In a way, you could say that these events are not only historical, they are geographical, even mythological. What do I mean by mythological? Well, we could say Moses split the Red Sea 3,000 years ago, and that's still remembered. But what is that compared to raising the global sea levels by 1 meter? That is a quite far larger event and will probably be remembered for a long time. I met a climate scientist in Potsdam in Germany, and he asked me, why don't you write about climate change? And I said, I don't have authority. I'm a writer and I'm not a scientist. But he said, people don't understand data. I've been making data for 20 years. People understand stories. So take my data and start to make stories. So I started to read and write, and I found out that the issue is in a way larger than language. How do you write about something that is about everyone you know and love, everything you will know and love, about the future of everything? What words can encapsulate such an event? We use a word, we call it climate change, we don't feel it strong enough, we call it climate crisis, then we call it climate emergency, but still, it's not like the words are breaking through. In a way, it's like the issue is like a black hole. That is, you can't look straight into a black hole because it absorbs all light. And in a way, this issue is similar. Language collapses in front of this issue. And the only way I found to talk about it that is like you look at a black hole, you look at the periphery, you look at the neighboring stars and galaxies, and I found out that to understand the future, I needed to connect to the past. To be scientific, I needed to be mythological. To be personal, to be universal, I needed to be personal. And to be rational, I needed to be poetic. Baba Diyam said, in the end, we will conserve only what we love will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And because the future and the issue is all about time, I felt like we were in a way disconnected from time. I was thinking of the oldest objects that I had seen in my life or handled, like this manuscript here, 800 years old, the primal source of Nordic mythology. I was thinking, I can understand this 800 years later. Is there anything today that we say that will be understood after 800 years, like in the year 2800? How can you preserve something for 800 years? But the issue of climate change is on a different time scale. It's closer to 100 years. And I was so lucky that I had almost all my grandparents alive, and I could have direct access to people that became 98 years old, that had lived throughout the 20th century, most of the changes, even born into medieval circumstances in terms of agriculture and hunting. And so I was interviewing my grandmother that turned 98 years old and the changes she had lived. And as a woman, one of the first in Iceland to fly. And she went on a 3-week glacial expedition in the year 1956 to measure and map Vatnajökull, Europe's biggest glacier. They were stuck in a storm for 3 days on their honeymoon, and I asked them, weren't you cold? And she said, cold, we were just married. And I was 11 when I asked first, and I didn't understand how you get warm when you get married. And then I was interviewing my other grandfather that became 98 as well, and I asked him, are 100 years a long time or a short time? And he said, you can't believe that 100 years are actually a very short time. They're over like this. He was a surgeon, chief surgeon in the New York hospital, and he operated on the Iranian Shah in 1979. And one of his patients was Oppenheimer, the father of the nuclear bomb. But he is also a symbol of time because scientists have proposed that the detonation of the atomic bomb should mark the beginning of the Anthropocene. That is, when man became formally a geological force, like comets, like ice ages, like tectonic movements and volcanoes. So we have become this geological force, but it's like we don't understand it yet, and we don't behave like we are one. We still believe like we are innocent innovators of the beginning of the 20th century. It takes sometimes 100 years to understand a new paradigm, to understand a new place against the planet or the universe. It took us almost 100 years to understand Copernicus, because of course we can't understand what he was saying on our own daily, day-to-day experience. It took Icelanders about 100 years to understand the concepts of democracy. When these words were coined in the year 1809, these words were total nonsense. What do you mean the poor and common shall have an equal share in the government with the rich and powerful? It sounded like some crazy idea. It didn't make any sense. And the words that were used, all of them were almost totally new in the language, and it took about 100 years to understand until we became independent in the year 1918. And at that time, women's rights were introduced by giving women the right to vote. And it took 100 years of voting, even though women were half the voters, it took 100 years to reach an equal parliament that we actually got the first time last year. So a 50-50 parliament. 100 years, even though you should believe that women would have agreed with the idea that they should vote for 50-50 parliament for 100 years. So a scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it, said Max Planck. And that brings us to a new word that we're confronted with now, the word ocean acidification. And this word is as new in our current society as the word democracy was in Iceland in the year 1809. Most people have not seen this word. Most people don't understand it. It's as new as the theory of Copernicus was in 1643. And what is this about? About 30% of CO2 emissions, they end in the world oceans. And before the end of this century, we believe, or scientists believe, or tell us, that the pH level might drop from 8.1 possibly to 7.7. This term was coined in 2004, and this is the fastest drop in the pH of the world oceans for 50 million years. That means that a single human being born today, becoming as old as my grandmother, will experience a greater change in the world oceans than not all the ancestors of man, not only all the evolution of humanity, but 10 times the evolution of our species, 50 million years. And this is more than mythological. And the problem is that almost all aspects of this are beyond our language. How can you tell somebody that 0.3 is the biggest number you might hear in your lifetime? It's the most dramatic event ever. How can you understand 2100 when our generation or my generation or maybe most of the people in this room still believe 1970 was 30 years ago? We can raise our hands. Was 1970 30 years ago? Yes, of course. So how can we understand this? And how can you understand the logarithmic scale of the pH level if you're not a doctor or scientist? So I think biologists really need the help of doctors that really understand the Goldilocks zone of 735 to 745 in human blood, that is similar to the world oceans. All organisms in the world oceans react similarly to the ocean around them as the blood, and we could have a total collapse in the ecosystem of the oceans if this goes unchanged. We understand plastic in the oceans. That's something tangible. That's something we understand. But in terms of ocean acidification, that's something that we can't experience in our daily life and has to be communicated by scientists. And because it's about the health of the oceans, it is about health of all humanity over the next hundreds of years. So in a paradigm shift, you're part of a change or you're hit by the change. And the glacial trips of my grandparents from the 1950s, and now the glaciers have been are in a total different point of view today than they were in the 1950s, when the glaciers were in the context of eternity. That is, the glaciers were in the context of the clouds, the mountains, the eternal things of nature. But now, because the glaciers have been measured and mapped for 70 years, then we can see how the glaciers are reacting to climate change and how, again, nature has left geological speed and is moving on a human speed. And for some coincidence, this is happening on a similar speed as the acidification of the oceans. The problem is, how do we understand a date like 2160? What does that have to do with us, 2160, when Blade Runner took place 2019? How can we connect to a date like this? So I did an experiment. I took my daughter to my grandmother's house, and we calculated, when do you become as old as grandmother? And my daughter found the date 2104. And then she thought, but what if you get what if somebody comes to visit, maybe your favorite person, your favorite 20-year-old, somebody born around 2080, when is that person remembering you as their fundamental influence in his or her life? And my daughter does the calculation, 2170. So the most important person in my daughter's life might remember her in the year 2170. And my grandmother told her a secret from the 1930s, just a sweet little secret. And my daughter promised to pass it on in the year 2100 and ask that person not to tell anybody until 2170, because our time, the handshake of generations, can be up to 250 years. Our time is the time of the people that we know and love, the time that we create, or the time that creates us, versus the time of the people that we will know and love, the time that we create. So when is someone still alive that you will love? You can try this calculation yourself and apply that to climate science, And then you will find out that 2080 is maybe not beyond your imagination. It might be only halfway in your most intimate circle of continuity. And you have to understand that 100 years are a very short time. Only in the lifetime of my children have the glaciers of Iceland changed like this. It's important because the glaciers of the world are all reacting at the same time in a very similar way. And I think specialists here can just imagine what happens if the same thing happens to Himalayan glaciers. At the same time, coastal areas are being evaded by rising sea levels. At the same time, people are experiencing droughts, heat waves, or extreme storms and floods like we just saw in Pakistan. So the pressure on human existence and therefore human health will be immense if many of these glacial rivers that 1 billion people rely on become possibly seasonal or totally dry. I got the strange request to write a letter to the future, a plaque that we placed on the first Icelandic glacier we lost to climate change. And I wrote this here, a letter to the future. Ok is the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all our glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done. Only you know if we did it. Thank you very much.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Andre. And you can see why his book is a must read. We're going to have 3 interventions now, and let me introduce our participants. First of all, it's a great pleasure to introduce Vivian Camacho. Vivian is the General Director of the Health Ministry in Bolivia. She will then be followed by Omnia El Omrani. Omnia is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon from Egypt, but she's also the official youth envoy for the Conference of the Parties presidency. And finally, Bantu Lamsam, who you've met already this morning, who is the chairman emeritus of the Capricorn Bank in Thailand. Vivian, why don't you begin, please?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would love to acknowledge and give thanks to the organizers, to the PMAC for this PMAC event, for our movement to be involved, for every one of you. And first of all, for me, it's very necessary to greet to the spirit places. I come from a sacred place. I come from Bolivia, from Collasuyu, which means the place of the healers, and also it means that we are alive as indigenous peoples. That's why my greeting goes also to the spiritual forces of this place, but also all of you. All of us have a beautiful ancestral lineage following us. If you could help me with my presentation, please. Can I have the changer or something? Thank you. I don't know how. Okay. Maybe there? Oh, I see. Thank you so much. I'm presenting to you Health of Mother Earth. And my first reflections are about remembering that health is a human right. Health is not a business. And I come from Bolivia, which is the heart of South America, which is a place which is struggling to go on economy. We are indigenous majority. That's why on behalf of my health ministry, on behalf of my former president, Luis Arce, and my vice president, David Choquehuanca, I present to you my greetings as well. So in Bolivia, we are struggling to have the universal health system, the health as a human right for everyone. But also we are struggling to have food as a human right, beyond corporations, beyond conflict of interest, we need to address this issue because we are talking about social determinants on health. We are talking about that for our people, health means dignity and social justice. And also, we are talking about different cultures. We have learned from one monocultural view, one kind of health, but we are different cultures alive in the world. Next. Next, please. So we have a different alive symbols in our territories. We have the door of the sun. We have different symbols that remember us who we are. We are not only 500 years of cultural resistance. We are cultures that come from millennia history. That's why we need to remember we are millennial people. That's why our roots are so deep and ancestral roots alive. Thank you. Next, please. Those people were the ones that took the chloroquina, the quina plant to the Channel of Panama in 1920. And it was something that they made as indigenous peoples when biochemistry, monocultural industrial wouldn't have any other answer. They took quina. Now you know chloroquina to treat malaria. Next. Our medicine is based on herbal. Our medicine is based on who we are, on our ancestral identity. Also, our ceremonies for sacred places. Next, please. Our ceremonies bring us a spiritual, harmonic life. Next, please. Next. We are talking about the living well, the buen vivir, which has to do with a beautiful paradigm of life, which has to do that everyone needs to be respected, everyone deserves the right to exist in its difference. And also, Mother Earth does not belong to us. We are of her. We are their children. She is our mother. That's why we are talking about health of Mother Earth. That's why we are talking about in Bolivia about the dialogue system between academic medicine and also ancestral medicine. In Bolivia, we have the law for ancestral medicine. This law was made by our people, and it recognizes spiritual guides, midwives. It recognizes herbalists and different specialties. And also, we are the only country in the Americas that had made this ancestral medicine guide for COVID-19. This is an official document from our health ministry that was built by my team. Next, please. We are talking about the colonization of health because we need to gain again our strength and our wisdom as a part of building health together. Not only one monocultural vision. The monocultural vision thinks that we need to eat the same, dress the same, think the same, consume the same, and also heal with the same drugs. Because it's monocultural. That's why they impose monocultural also cultives, monocultural crops. Have you seen in that beautiful picture that Batung showed us? Monocultural, the same. But we are native forest. We are different. Our differences will make us emerge with new responses for Mother Earth, new responses for this multipolarity, for this crisis. And also we are talking about depatriarchalization, because as women, we have suffered the patriarchy upon our bodies during centuries. And I'm dressed today with the clothes of my mothers, my grandmothers. My grandmothers wouldn't be allowed in school because they were indigenous, because it was forbidden. That's why I am here as a doctor. I had a study in Cochabamba, Bolivia, but also in Ghent, Belgium. I am a surgeon doctor. But then I went back to community because my community still suffer hunger, still suffer different other needs. We don't have water. That's why health has to do with different living conditions, which has to do with social justice. And also Mother Earth for us, she is the one taking care of us. Next, please. We talk about the thank you to the farmers in the world. We have food on our table. It's not agribusiness. It's farmers of the world that are feeding the world. Next, please. Next. And we talk about the cycle, ritual cycle of human life. We have ceremonies for harvesting, for seeding. We have ceremonies to receive the sun, the movements of the sun, the movements of the moon. We need to remember we are cosmic creatures going on this Mother Earth. Next. Thank you. And the spirit of our ancestors, the prayers of our grandmothers, they protect us, they guide us. That's why I have come with these sacred ones. I'm part of the Sacred Council of the Eagle and the Condor of the Americas. And we are trying to join together different spiritual guides, different spiritual fighters to remember all of us deserve to be different. All of us deserve to be alive with dignity. All of us deserve healthy food, healthy air, healthy water, as to have health in this Mother Earth. Next. We are talking about dignity, life without injustice, without humiliation, a hard living inside a community. Individualism is part of colonization. When you blame people because you have your sickness because you didn't take care of yourself, you are forgetting the most basic need, which is community. We are community. All together, we belong together, we take care of each other, and we defend life together. Next. Also in Bolivia, we have I am part of the minister. We have this vice minister of ancestral medicine, and we are working along with our ancestral healers that were in the front line during COVID-19. And also we defeated with different kind of healings this situation, and we are going stronger. Next. I am part of the High-Level Commission Alma-Ata 40 years for the Americas. We were the only region that promoted again Alma-Ata Declaration, which has to do with the social determination of health, which has to do with multi-sectoral work, but also my main work was to remain there, Mother Earth health. If we want human health, we need health of Mother Earth. Take care of water resources, take care of territory, take care of the human rights, a life without violence, a life without racism, respecting who we are, respecting our ancestral spirituality. Next. In this document, I have interviewed different elder people from Latin America and Caribbean region, and we have testimonies how our ancestral medicine coped with our people during COVID-19. Next. This is a beautiful case. Our people would go with plants, with herbs, with ceremonies, home by home, but also with sacred songs, sacred prayers, with ceremonies for the sacred places to take care of entire community. Next. I am a midwife from the Quechua people, and as a midwife, we are giving birth to this time of humanity. It's in our hands now. As Andrew said, what are we waiting for? As Andrew said, and some other main speakers said, what are we waiting for? Now is the time. We are the next ancestors. What kind of ancestors are we going to be for the ones that are going to be born saying, oh my, you didn't do anything to prevent this? Next. Mother Earth is the most beautiful healer. Mother Earth gives us shelter, gives us food. She gives air to breathe. She gives us water. She as a mother, she produces enough for everyone, but few for the greedy ones. That's what Mahatma Gandhi said. So we need to see that we are the change we want to see in the world, but also it's the time of flowering of our people. Next. Continue investigating, continue promoting, and the Global South must speak up because we are suffering the consequences of colonization, of robbery of our land, of robbery of our water sources, because this absurd model of consumption is consuming our lives. We are the external cost of the greedy corporations' production. Next. I am part of People's Health Movement. My movement encouraged me to go on more than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I have been here as well at the PMAC event. And also, it's wonderful to be back to see that we are stronger, to remember that health is a human right. And also, we are in the 5 continents to remember, even we are small, we are humble people. I come from a farmer community. Even though when we unite our hands with each other, we need to remember that we are strong in the diversity. That's why I have brought my flag with me. It means the beautiful colors of the rainbow. Each color is different, but each color has its own strength, its own beauty. All together gives us beauty for life. So life will be beautiful when we need to remember cultural diversity, human diversity, diversity of thought takes care of biodiversity. Thank you so much.
Wow. Vivian, that was incredible. What a call to action. And I love your concept of the health of Mother Earth. It's a much more powerful way of describing planetary health than any of us could imagine. And yes, indeed, we belong together. What a great message to come out of PMAC 2023. Let me turn now to Omnia. The floor is yours, Omnia.
Hello everyone. I'm so happy to be with you today, and a very big thank you to PMAC and to the incredible participants that made today happen. So first of all, as a young person, I'm asked to shoulder the impacts of climate change on my health and well-being. Human activities that led to climate change has been taking away our homes, our schools, our food, our drinking water, and the very air that we breathe. 1 out of 5 children and young people do not have access globally to the drinking water that they need. 920 million to be exact. In Pakistan alone, the flooding has affected over 16 million young people. With 500 dead, 18,000 schools destroyed, as well as thousands of healthcare facilities. If we also look at the mental health impacts of climate change, such natural disasters lead to 40 to 1 the physical injuries. But I also want to reflect on my experience as a medical doctor, because I saw many patients come in the ER presenting with heat stress and heat stroke during the summer. Their body temperature reaching up to 40 degrees with irreversible changes to their physical as well as their mental health. And if they are 65 years or older, if they have an existing lung or a heart disease, or even worse, if they cannot access the health facility in time, they would lose their life. And I'd like to quote Christina Figueres when she said that we cannot close our ears, we cannot turn away our eyes from all the pain. This is the reality that we are facing right now. And this is due to the relentless depletion of our global commons, our forests, our oceans, our rivers, soil, and air. And all of that in the pursuit of economic growth. And this has me and my generation asking, when are we going to stop burning fossil fuels? When are we going to reduce our carbon emissions? When are we going to stop pursuing the economic growth that is destroying our natural habitat and really pushing our entire ecosystem to a breaking point? But as young people, we are not waiting for the answers. We are rising to the climate challenge, and we are taking the lead. We are doing it with creativity, with innovation, with commitment, but most importantly, we are doing it with an unwavering optimism that a better and a healthier world is possible, where we place planetary health and climate justice at the center. And I know that because as the first youth envoy for the COP president for the UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt, who was our Minister of Foreign Affairs, I had the opportunity to work with many young people, but I'd also like to call them young experts, innovators, and entrepreneurs that really led their own concrete solutions, closing that implementation gap from all the 2030, 2040 targets to our local communities. From developing drought-resistant seedlings in Kenya, to creating portable solar-powered refrigerators in India to keep the vegetables fresh for increasing the farmer's income, to creating school and university curriculum focusing on planetary health and climate change in Peru, in the US, in Malaysia, and creating mental health support journals for young people in the UK. And these are just examples of what young people are capable of. But as we are right now setting a new health agenda for the nexus between climate change, biodiversity, and the environment, I invite you, and I only have 2 requests for you in the next 3 days, as well as when you go back to your countries. Reorient your policy spaces. Integrate young people, but not as add-ons, as natural and equal partners. Create your own spaces where young people not only participate in your climate and health response efforts, but they are emerging with creative youth-led solutions. Because trust me, when I was in the presidency, I had the opportunity to influence the cover decision, which was adopted by over 197 countries, and we had the mention of children and youth participation 7 and 11 times for the first time in history. And my second request for you is that for grassroots youth-led initiatives and organizations, funding has always been inaccessible and challenging. And I've heard from many partners and allies that it's very easy to create innovative challenges, competitions, incubators, simply providing seed funding and micro grants for young people to really elevate their solutions and the tremendous potential it has. One good example is the Youth Adapt Challenge, which has been organized for several years by the African Development Bank. Also, the World Economic Forum organizes the same for many young innovators and leaders. And we really need to do the same when it comes to climate and health solutions. So finally, we cannot delay any further action. The science is clear. The solutions are there. So really, let's work together as allies to fight and win the planetary health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omnia, and thank you for your passionate and absolutely spot on pointing out of the absurd obsession we have with growth today. Thank you for drawing attention to the importance of mental health. And also thank you for your call effectively for ecological equity, not merely health equity. Our third intervention today comes from Bantoon Lamsam. Bantoon, the floor is yours.
If you don't mind, I just talk from my seat here. As you may have surmised from my earlier remark today, I'm fascinated personally with big trees. I feel good to be in a forest. But on the broader significance, big trees are still the only sure way to absorb carbon dioxide. Photosynthesis is the only process that has worked over the hundreds and thousands of years. And we don't have enough of that even now. And we're losing the forest left and right. That's a disaster in the making. There's been news of reports about new technology of carbon trapping. It's promising, but still in a very early stage. I don't think we're going to be able to scale that in the foreseeable future, even though it's something to hope for. So I think the task at hand is to, on the absorption side, and make sure that we retain, we're losing, by the way, we're retaining the big forests. So help absorb the carbon dioxide. I've been told by Mr. Magnussen here that carbon dioxide also goes into the ocean, that raises the acidity of the ocean water that kills the corals. That is a disaster on that side of the earth. But in any case, I think the challenge for all concerned about the climate change and the health of the people on earth is that to make sure that the trees don't get destroyed more than it already had, and then actually to recover that. I don't see that happening easily. I mean, there's a reason why people cut down trees. They have to make, there are more people on earth, and people have to make a living. Mostly the areas that the trees have grown in the past are the areas of where poor people are. And they have to find an easy way out, which is not recommendable. But that's the task of any government and any group of people who want to help change the way things get done on Earth here is to make sure that we find a new way of making a living under the trees. The dilemma is a difficult one. If we want to big trees, there's not going to be any room under the trees that much to grow traditional crops. Fruits and all that is not going to work. It has to be a different kind of trees that requires less space, less water, no sunlight. It still can be transformed and processed into some products that can sell at a reasonable price. We can't get out of this challenge of being a survivor in a very capitalistic world. We can't. It's beyond that age now. We have to be able to manage, to negotiate that challenge. And the people at the far end, at the lower end of the society have to be helped because they alone don't have that capacity. So that's the challenge at hand. Having said that, on the emission side, that's a real killer. Because the emission has increased beyond the capacity even of the earlier forests of the world to absorb. So that has to be reduced in a big way. I'm sure that's what has been discussed throughout all the stages around the world. And that's the task that all countries have to come to. Politics will come into the way. And politicians are very reluctant, despite all the flowery things that they say, very reluctant to legislate laws to prevent emission from fossil fuel, which is a major factor in increasing carbon dioxide. Because if you make laws to slow down or block industrial productions that use fossil fuels, you step on somebody's toes. And that's difficult for the politician to address. But that's something that is of a challenge, just to be on a realistic front, that we have to push on the politics side to make sure that they are brave enough to set a very stringent agenda in terms of reduction of emission. Seems to be moving in that direction, but I believe we're going to see the numbers coming down. At the same time, we will have to get back to forest. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Bantun. And we should be hopeful. On his first day in office, Brazil's new president, Lula da Silva, signed a package, I think, of 7 executive orders that were aimed to control deforestation in the Amazon. And he reinstated the Amazon Fund, over $1 billion fund designed to protect the world's largest rainforests. So let us be optimistic about those opportunities ahead of us. When we have political leadership and political commitment, things can indeed happen. Now, I want to try and connect Andre's opening address with the 3 interventions that we've had so far. And in his book, he writes about how ecology should be part of our everyday lives. And you saw from his presentation several very moving and compelling examples of why that should be so. But how? It's easy to say, but perhaps more difficult to do, which is why we haven't done it very often. How can we make ecology part of our everyday lives? And perhaps I'll start, I'm looking at the stage here, and we'll start on the left-hand side, Omnia, and then we'll move down the speakers.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I believe there are 2 ways, in my opinion. The first is education. And this has been truly important when you integrate ecology, specifically looking at the environment and climate change and planetary health, not only at the level of university students, but also in schools. We had at COP27 a delegation of children. One of them was 13 years old, and he wrote his own book on climate change. So it's so important to really build a new mindset where we place the health of the environment as well as human health at heart. The second thing that we are also using as young experts is really thinking about how we have a responsibility towards our community, and that is why we need to integrate climate justice and the environment in our daily lives, in the way that we consume our food, in the way that we really utilize and uptake sustainable habits. And we now have the digital tools to do that. And it also proves very effective when it comes to inspiring our families to follow us and do the same. But I think what we have here as the health and the scientific community is a very powerful argument to drive the integration of ecology in our daily lives, because right now it's not about the health of the environment, it's about our physical and mental health and well-being, and we need to protect that. And this brings in the necessary drive, both on the individual level as well as on the political level.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think Vivian is sitting next to you.
Thank you so much. It's very necessary to reflect that a colonial thought made us thought that we are separated from Earth. They made us believe that we are just Earth is separated from us, that it's a resource. But for our ancient wisdom, we are part of her. We are part of the great textile of life. So we need to remember we have the strength of the earth, of the fire, of water, of the air. That we need to remember if she is healthy, we are going to be healthy. So when we are talking about Mother Earth health, we are talking about the health of ourselves. Ourselves are part of her. So if you know April 22nd in the world, April 22nd, the day of Mother Earth, it's because United Nations accepted this proposal from Bolivia. So Bolivia, we are the advocates of Mother Earth. In Bolivia, we are proposing, we have the law for Mother Earth. In Bolivia, we are promoting this. Remember, you just need to remember, all of us are sons and daughters of Mother Earth. All of us need to unite again and remember that we have come to take care of life. All of us are the guardians of water, guardians of our territories, the guardians of Mother Earth. So we just need to remember, all of you, all of us, we come from ancestral lineage, that our ancestors have taken care of this thread of life. So we need to take care of it for the next generation as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Bantu.
From my short experience dealing with the issue of the deforestation, I have to say that preservation of the forest, as important as it is to the human world, is not the number one priority. Number one priority is survival. And for in the forest being the rural area, the poor areas of any country, especially Thailand, the people there are understandably, they will claim duress. They have to cut down trees because they have another way to go to find a piece of land that they can have decent kind of agriculture. And they're not going to, and they have not got the capacity to change their way of life. They don't have that kind of knowledge. They don't have the financial resources. They have no access to any policy directions. So they're not going to be able to pull themselves up by the bootstrap. To the contrary, they're going to pull everybody down with the destruction of the forest that they live on. So there has to be concerted, coordinated effort to change the way people live in the forest. And that is a tall order from the short period of time that I tried to work this problem here. Still going at it, but it would take continued policy support from the state and also the bring in the resources in every way, financial resources, knowledge resources, technical resources, to bear upon the question is how do we get people still live reasonably well in an area that has to be grown back into big trees? And that's still going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrew, your book, I think, was originally published in Icelandic in 2019. And so you've been working now for some years to make ecology part of everyday life. What's your experience?
I think, especially for children, it's more and more difficult to give them a connection to nature. Cities are more dense. The technology has given devices that are easier than nature. Children spend maybe 3, 4, 5 hours on screens daily, commonly. So now we're starting to talk about just being outdoors, maybe just out in the schoolyard, almost as nature. And I think we need a more greater concentrated effort to bring nature to children, bring nature into classrooms, bring nature into cities. Maybe part of the solution in the non-forest might be forest camps for children that are maybe deprived of nature living in cities. And that could provide some kind of solution, understanding, and service. So I just think bringing children intentionally to nature, dirt into the classroom, trees, plants, tangible things, instead of the trend of bringing iPads and thinking that you can swipe your way through, just having your fingers actively doing something.
Yeah, thank you very much. You can't swipe your way through life. I love your point about schools. It's very sad. We lost a great friend in global health, George Patton, last year, and we should remember him. And George's work on emphasizing the importance of schools as a place to create health and well-being for children and young people was one of his lasting legacies. And the idea of bringing nature into classrooms is a very, very powerful one indeed. Thank you. Let's turn to think about the future and the biggest opportunities that we have. Let's think positive. I mentioned Lula da Silva. We're not all presidents of countries, but what's the biggest opportunity that you would want to send everybody home with in the audience at PMAC today? Again, Omnia.
I believe the biggest opportunity, if we were to go back, if I were to go back to Egypt and each participant to their country, I would say that this is a unique convening of incredible community as well as policy leaders. And for many years, I've seen how the climate agenda and the health agenda was always trying to come together with climate change, in which every climate conference for the past 27 years, there are always commitments being made, but then when it comes to implementation, we see very little. And I believe that as the health community, we are able to connect the dots between the destruction of our natural habitats and our future ability to stop that and to secure a healthier future for my generation and the generations to come, because we are able to generate the necessary data and information and then translate it into action. But one thing I'd like all the participants here to always use in the work that they do, which is the bottoms-up approach, to listen to the communities that we work with, listen to the young people in your organization or institution or your country, and then develop solutions according to not just what the science is telling us, but to also what the communities need, so that we are co-creating solutions together. This gives not only effectiveness in what we do, but it also gives credibility and relevance to how we can shape the world together, because we are all in common agreement that urgent action is important, but it's also possible. But for us to make sure with the very little window of time that we have, that we are creating solutions for the health of the environment and the people. And we really need the voices of our community in the political climate space to really stop our countries and our world leaders from backtracking on their commitments and their promises and translate it into real action, because it has been 7 years since the Paris Agreement and still very little is seen. But we have the optimism and the solutions and the practicality of making these targets happen now before it's too late.
Brilliant. Thank you, Omnia. Vivian, opportunities for the future.
For the future, we dream the future. We are building the future. We are the future that our grandfathers and grandmothers dreamed of. That's why we are building the future today. So, I come from our People's Health Movement, and we have this beautiful verb to build hope, esperanzar. Paulo Freire taught us, build hope, esperanzar. So our name now, all of us together, is hope. We don't know how is it going to be made. We don't have a recipe. We don't have it. But when two hearts come together and we remember we are community, something can be born. And that possibility of life is what we have. That possibility of life shows us that even though we are small ones, we are simple people in our country, in the global south especially, the ones suffering hunger, the ones suffering violence, racism, very hard situations. Even though that happened during COVID-19, communities organized to feed each other, to take care of each other, to remember that each other, we need to remain together and love life together. So in that way, we will take off life together. That's why life will guide us. ¿Quién dijo que todo está perdido? Yo vengo a ofrecer mi corazón. Tanta gente que se llevó el río. Yo vengo a ofrecer mi corazón. Who said everything is lost? I come to offer my heart. So we don't know, but if we get together, new possibilities, life will emerge. Thank you.
Wow. Gosh, can somebody please make you UN Secretary General? Fantastic, thank you. And Bantoon, opportunities.
It is encouraging to see that these days more people from various circles of the society are more cognizant and more proactive in terms of dealing with the challenge of the environment and all the elements that come with that. Especially in the business capitalistic circles, which bear the burden of coming up with a production method, industrial production method that will lessen the emission of the carbon dioxide, among other things. But there's still, as I said earlier, there's still a requirement that has not been met of reaching a new kind of technical solution that will be politically acceptable, of course, and we will be able to negotiate the increasingly difficult trade-offs between the livelihood of the people and the survival of the forest and the environment. I just like to, I think the battle also goes on, the effort goes on more and more, and I'm hopeful that will bring us to a new level of being competitive against this new kind of challenge. I just want to quote the father of the Chinese Revolution over a century ago, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, Sun Zhongshan in Mandarin, in trying to make a big change he was going through at that time, and he said, action is easy, it's the knowledge that is difficult. And that's what we have to deal with again a century later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bantu, for that thought. And Andre, opportunities.
Well, I think that there is so much low-hanging fruit because like Omnia and the Youth Envoy has been pointing out, we're not treating it yet as an emergency, the climate crisis. That is because we have the health sector here, and the health sector seems to have both respect and authority. So in the stone, scissor, paper game against business or other interests, health often wins. For example, we saw the corona crisis, and unthinkable things happened when we collectively attacked the corona crisis and saved millions of lives with very painful measures. Like if you ask somebody, like, how did your life change through corona? And people can talk endlessly. I didn't go to weddings, I didn't go to school, I had a mask, I was vaccinated, borders were closed, and lots of annoying, difficult things that were taken. Some mistakes, of course, but you could really feel that you were in a crisis, that it was taken seriously. But then you ask somebody, okay, is climate change bigger than corona? Well, in the long term, of course, yes. It's about the future of everything, and possibly the generation of new diseases also. So ask them, okay, so how did your life change after the fourth IPCC report? Like, just name me the 10 biggest challenges that the most annoying things, something similar to masks or social distancing. Tell me how your life changed after the IPCC UN conventions. And people are like, yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah, just tell me the 10 top things that you're like, you do differently today versus 2020. And people are like, versus 2000 even. And they're like, yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, just the top 10 things. Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, what can't I do? Yes, that's a very good question. My uncle bought a Tesla. Okay. Is that the greatest sacrifice that you can think of in terms of tackling climate change? Do you think that will save us? I think we have to start really feeling that there's a change. And inevitably, in a paradigm shift, it will be uncomfortable, it will be disruptive, it will challenge us, it will be something we might not really want to do, but really have to do. So I really call for the health sector to become activists and to take climate change into the health agenda as a core part, not like a side thing, but as a core fundament for future human health, and start challenging us with what we actually have to do, just like a doctor challenges us with how we have to stop smoking, how we have to prevent all sorts of things. Even though I want to eat candy all day, I'm sorry, you can't do that. So what do the doctors advise us?
Okay, thank you for that injunction. We must work harder to integrate climate. Please thank our wonderful panel and speakers today. We need to draw this session to a close. I have just one final observation. As an editor of a journal, what I particularly liked in Andre's book was his observation that we are in a struggle, but a very particular kind of struggle, a struggle over words, because the struggle is about how we word the world, as he put it. Words create our reality. So to close this session, please let us understand that we are in a struggle, and let us choose our words very, very carefully. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Please give our panel a round of applause.